All right, so thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate your time. I know you all have very busy lives. My name is Dr. Jennifer Billingsley. I am the program chair, and I'm excited to be here with you today to discuss some extra resources that you have available to you and to definitely answer any questions and get you on the right track as you move forward in your program. So the first thing that I would like to go over is the Office of Field Experience Guidelines Manual. And I want to be sure that all of you are able to get to this document. And you basically, the website that so there's two GCU websites. One is public facing, and then you also have one that is student facing. This was a change within the last, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so. So you want to go to students.gcu.edu, and that's where I'm at right now. That's where you're seeing this screen share. And right on the right side here, you're going to see academics, and you're going to go all the way down and click to College of Nursing and Healthcare Professions. You're going to click on that. You're going to scroll down the page a little bit, and you're going to see OFE, Connecting Classroom Theory to Real Life Experience. And right under here it says Guidelines for Graduate Field Experiences. When you click on that, this is going to give you a very extensive manual. Luckily, you do not have to read this whole 100+ manual. You're going to go right down to page 90. Starting on page 90 is the DNP program. What you do want to be very familiar with is all of the information in this DNP section. This is going to discuss the student learning outcomes, how we're aligned with AACN and NOM, what the DNP essentials look like, and how our program aligns with those essentials. This will also talk to you about the practice immersion experience, what that looks like, independent study hours, which we'll go over today as well. And most of the time, most of the questions I have from students, you can usually be referred back to this manual. So if there's some burning questions that you have, I really highly suggest that you look at this manual first. If you're unable to find it here, or if you need further clarification, please contact your faculty. And if they're unsure of the answer, they will contact me. So that's what this looks like. It has all of the information regarding the class, algorithms for your practice hours, what all of the content expert mentor requirements are, how do you contact OFE to get your mentor approved, all of those things. And a few of those specific items we will be discussing today. So I wanted you to be familiar with this document. I highly recommend taking a look at this. The other thing to remember about this document is that it's a fluid document. And what that means is I don't want you printing this out because things can change. Now, there's probably not huge changes, but there are changes, and so you do want to look at this regularly. My suggestion is to bookmark this page so that every time it pops up on your computer, you'll be getting the most recent version. So that's the first thing that I would highly suggest, if you haven't already, to take a look at and go through. All right. So the next item that I'd like to talk about is the DPI project. I do have a PowerPoint available for you in the DC network. So I'm not going to go through this line by line because this is available to you and you can look at this on your own, but I really wanted to highlight a few things so that as you're writing your PICO questions, moving into your 10 strategic points and onwards into your literature review, that you are on the right track. You have a good topic that is feasible and will be able to move you right into your project courses. So it's important to recognize that we did not just randomly decide these project recommendations. We are CCNE approved. This program is approved. This program has been in progress since 2014, and we did receive approval from CCNE. And our guidelines for your projects and really for the program is related to NOM, NONPF, and also your AACN. And your AACN is your doctoral DNP essentials. You may have heard that. Those are things that you want to be familiar with because those will guide this program, and those essentials also guide your project. So I'm going to review the NOMP project recommendations, and I'm also going to run through the DNP essential recommendations. And really these two recommendations completely align. So through the NOMP DPI project recommendations, the project's related to advanced practice in the nursing specialty and benefits a population, group, or community rather than an individual patient. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we move into the TIFON documentation. So this often arises, your project often arises from your clinical practice. Now, if you are currently a faculty member and you work in an academic situation, then you will need to have a clinical practice. You will need to have a clinical site, whether that is a community site, if you have one on your academic university campus, that's fine. If it's a community center, but you will need to have some kind of clinical practice site that you are able to do your practice immersion hours. And your DPI project, if you can, I probably say this sentence many times a day, but your DPI, Direct Practice Improvement Project, translates existing knowledge or guidelines into clinical practice to improve patient outcomes. So we are not looking at academics in any way. We are not putting together curriculum, anything like that. This is completely related to clinical. This is a clinical degree looking at patient outcomes. I'm going to be very clear on that. The project leadership may be solo or collaborative depending on the scope of the project and university requirements. Our university requirements is that it is a solo project. The scholarly project addresses identified needs. So you're looking at gaps. You're looking at your current clinical practice, and you are looking at what guidelines are out there that we don't use. They're out there. They have a valid, reliable tool that we know works, that has good existing literature that supports that tool, and we're not using it. It takes, most research takes, it takes 18 years between the literature actually being translated into clinical practice. So that's really where this DNP program and position comes into play. And then we're talking the literature review suggests an evidence base for the project or supports the need for the project. So your literature review is really important. If you cannot find enough literature to support your gap, support your project, then it probably is not a viable project. That's something to think about. Our literature reviews are anywhere from 15 to 30 pages. I know that seems like a lot, but if you have a topic, think about medication errors. Think about how much literature is out there about medication errors. And so it needs to be a topic that has been well researched, but maybe not quite implemented into practice. Description of the innovation is adequate for others to use, essential components for success, cost, etc., and feasibility. Be thinking about that with your project. Many times these projects, we have these grandiose ideas and we're going to solve the world's problem. I want you to take it down a notch. I want you to remember that this project has to be feasible. You have to have a clinical site. You have to have a population that you're able to access, and it needs to be feasible in a reasonable time frame, and we'll talk about that too. The next thing is systematic approaches used and data are collected using methods and tools that meet accepted standards. And that just means that your intervention should be based on a tool or guideline that is already in existence. You're not creating a new guideline. You're not creating a new tool. If you were doing that, that would be more of a PhD dissertation. So DNP, again, the reason for that is to translate the existing knowledge or existing guidelines into clinical practice. The project is conducted according to ethical principles. You are going to be completing, it's called CITI training, CITI training, and that's completed in DNP-830. There's 2 big modules that you will complete as part of an assignment during that course. And that allows you to understand the ethical principles related to research, basically. And you will need to submit both of those documents when you submit your proposal to IRB. Dissemination modes are professional and public. So currently your manuscripts, when you're all done, your manuscripts are published in the GCU library. And you do have the option to publish in ProQuest as well. And then what I suggest, what we recently added to the projects, in your very final defense, you will actually put a PowerPoint presentation, poster presentation together. And it's just on one slide. And what you can do is actually print that out if you do poster presentation in conferences. So it's very user-friendly and viable when you have a conference that you'd like to go to or present at. So we do have dissemination modes, and that's another important piece of this project. So AACN DNP white paper, again, that's the DNP Essentials. They just put out a white paper that in 2015. And if you haven't seen that, at the very end of this PowerPoint, short PowerPoint, you'll have some references. Highly recommend that you take a look at these because they did update the requirements from the original, I think it was 2011 that they came out. So focus, these you will see from the AACN will mirror the NOMF guidelines. Focus on a change that impacts healthcare outcomes either through direct or indirect care, have a systems or population aggregate focus, implementation in appropriate arena or area of practice, and again, that's clinical practice, that is not academics. Include a plan of sustainability, and then a piece of that evaluation process or outcomes. Can be formative or summative. So all of your projects will need to make sure you have something that you're implementing and then you're evaluating measurable outcomes. All right. And then this is an article that was actually presented by AACN, and it's called EC as Pi, 5 criteria for executing a successful DNP final project. I'm not going to go through all the details with this. You can look at this on your own or possibly read the article. It's only a couple pages, but I thought it really gives you some great information and some ideas on projects. So the EC as Pi, the E stands for enhances, C is for culmination, P is for partnerships, I is for implements, and then E is for evaluation. Many of the things that we just discussed. So E for enhances practice outcomes, health outcomes, or healthcare policy to ultimately improve patient outcomes. Remembering that you need to have those measurable outcomes. The C is culmination. DNP Learner will reflect a culmination of practice inquiry. You must become experts on your identified problem or topic and utilize the knowledge and competencies acquired in this doctoral program to enact change. That's the main reason of this, right? Where you're going to be going through all of these different classes, learning all of these new concepts, or possibly building on concepts that you're already working with in your current profession. And you're building on them, and you're going to utilize all that information to build this project. And these are also the domains and competencies that you're using in your practice immersion hours, which we'll talk about as well. P is for partnerships. You will see as you develop your project that you need to collaborate, right? That's real life. That's real life situations. We're always collaborating. Any kind of healthcare system, we're collaborating. We need to know who our stakeholders are and what that looks like for our project. So many times you may have a great idea of a project, but sometimes you have to get buy-in. You have to get buy-in from your clinical site. A lot of times you have to align your project with your clinical site's initiatives. And that's okay, that's positive, right? They have those initiatives probably for a reason because they've seen poor outcomes for some reason in some scenarios. So definitely partner with your system, your clinical site, make sure you have access to those patients. or nurses, and try to see what that looks like for your project. But definitely collaboration is huge. And then implements, as we talked about, the DNP learner will implement, translate, apply evidence into practice. And then E is the evaluation piece. The DNP learner will evaluate healthcare practice or policy outcomes. You need to include outcome measures, so direct patient care, healthcare measures, cost, quality improvement, accessibility of care, and then of course any existing or newly implemented healthcare policy or system of care on a population. So to wrap this up, the project or PICO reminders. This is probably, you'll be starting your PICOs if you haven't already in your classes. This is one of the best ways to really think of a project in a systematic manner. So your population, again, should be patients, but sometimes it can be to nurses so that it can be translated into improved patient outcomes. But most of the time it's patients. But here's a couple things I need you to think about. So what are vulnerable populations? These are discouraged. Vulnerable populations include pregnant women, human fetuses, neonates, prisoners, children, homeless individuals, cognitive impaired persons, students, employees, minorities, economic and educationally disadvantaged, AIDS and HIV subjects. Those are all considered vulnerable populations per the IRB. And so it's not that you couldn't use those, but it's very discouraged because if you do use one of those populations, you will go through a full IRB approval system, and that can be very lengthy. So for the purposes of this project, I highly discourage using those populations. And then as we discussed, you need to have access to that population. And then for your intervention, I encourage using existing, valid, reliable tools. That goes back to your literature review. See what tools are out there. What are the best tools? Why are they valid, reliable? And for some reason, we're not using them in clinical practice. Feasibility, that's huge. And sometimes that's the easiest one to forget because you will probably become very passionate about your project and your project topic. But you have to always remember feasibility. You don't want a project that's going to get bigger than you're able to complete in this program. And sometimes that happens because you're working with an organization that may want you to make it bigger because they're looking for certain outcomes, in which you gently have to remind them that within this program, this is the area that you can complete your project on. And then you can always take that and move that into further research if needed. So be thinking about that. Clinical site time. Time is probably the big one. You will have 3 project courses at the end, and each of them are 8 weeks. Many students, not many students, some students need the extension course after 965, mainly because students will need IRB approval from large facilities. So let me speak to you about this. So large facilities, mostly hospital organizations, if they have their own IRB, then you will need to get that approval for your project first, and then you send that to GCU's IRB and you would be considered exempt here. So that's something to think about. If you're in your clinical site and you think you're going to do your project there, you may want to inquire, or maybe you're already involved in it, may inquire about their IRB if they have one. And if they do, you may want to see what their timeline is. Some of the hospital IRBs meet monthly, some of them meet quarterly. So that's something to think about, and that kind of goes into that feasibility piece as well. Comparison. So most of the time, these projects will have no comparison or no intervention. Whatever your intervention is, the other side will have no intervention, the comparison. Or it's just standard of care. What are you doing right now as standard of care? And then your intervention would be what you're implementing. And then outcome, again, must be measurable. So you don't have to be measuring 10 different outcomes. You want to really simplify this into, here's my intervention. I want to see if it creates this to improve patient outcomes. And you want to be able to measure that. So you will likely have to have some kind of tool that you're able to measure that. So an example of a time constraint, and I've had students that have wanted to measure hemoglobin A1Cs with diabetic patients, which is a very great measuring tool. We know that in clinical practice. However, that is going to automatically take you 3 months to wait as a post-intervention if that's what you're measuring. So that may not be the best outcome to measure. So those are some of the feasibility and time constraints that you need to be thinking about. And then time, again, feasibility. So here's some exemplars that is related to AACN. So you can look into those. Actually, there's one other thing I wanted to go over real quick. As far as intervention. So we have a lot of students, nurses, we're nurses. We love education, right? And myself included. So remember, if you are doing an education intervention, you cannot just be measuring knowledge. So if I'm going to give education to floor nurses on safety precautions, on patient safety precautions, and then I do a pre-post test on did they gain knowledge. We don't really know if that's going to translate into improved patient outcomes. All it does is translate is that we have more knowledgeable nurses. So you would need to measure something regarding patients. So in that aspect, you would have some intervention maybe that you're doing for the nurse that is going to decrease patient falls, and you may want to measure patient falls. So be thinking about that. If you're going to do an educational intervention, you can't just measure knowledge. You have to be actually measuring a patient outcome. All right. So the next thing I want to go into is Typhon, our favorite. First, I want to talk to you about how to get your mentor approved. I think most of you are in the midst or have already done this, but I just wanted to go over this quickly. So this is the DNP Student Site Mentor Approval Checklist. You're going to provide this information to the Office of Field Experience via the DNP inbox at dnp.ofe@gcu.edu. They have a checklist here. They will, Office of Field Experience will input that information into Typhon. And then myself, I go in and I review all of the CVs, I review licensures, anything like that, make sure that everything looks good, that the mentors are appropriate for the program according to our guidelines, and then you will be approved and you'll receive access to Typhon. So that's what that process looks like. This is a change from our previous process. So if you do have faculty that are a little confused on the process or need some more details, please have them contact me. But we did send out emails to student and faculty about this new process. So just let me know if you're having any concerns about that. Once in a while, we do have students that are in very rural areas, and it's very difficult to find a mentor. If you're that person, just let me know. You know, all I'm seeing is a CV and licensures. So if there's more of a story behind it that you need to let me know, that's fine. I am always, just in general, I'm always willing to work with you, listen to you, listen to your feedback. And so if there's a situation you feel you need to discuss with me that better explains what you're needing from the program or from myself, just let me know. So in general, this is the way to request your mentor approval. And this is also the same way you will request for content experts. So from now until 8:40, you will have mentors. And then when you get into your project courses, your 3 project courses, you will have a content expert only. And that content expert can be the same person as a mentor, as your mentor has been, if it's appropriate, but your content expert becomes a part of your committee. You will have your chair, who is also your faculty online, and then you will have your content expert. And the 3 of you are your committee for your project. So you can be thinking about a content expert as far as once you really start to get into your project a little bit more, then you'll kind of know which route to take with your content expert. It's really nice to have a content expert that is involved in your organization or your clinical site of where you're going to do your project. That's very helpful. And you want somebody who has the true essence of a content expert, meaning they will be reviewing your proposal, your manuscript, and they will particularly be reviewing your chapter 2, which is your literature review, to give any further suggestions on the content. So you can be thinking about that for now, and but do know that right now until your first project course, you're going to only have a mentor, and then that role will be replaced by a content expert. Okay, so let's go into Typon. Actually, let's go into practice immersion hours, and then I can tell you how to show you how to document them. So practice immersion hours. The best way to explain practice immersion hours, as I previously said, is really the weekly assignments that you have that have every assignment in the directions at the very end. I meant to pull this up. At the very end has a statement that says practice immersion, this assignment qualifies for practice immersion hours. You'll see that statement, and that's the one those are the assignments that you will want to include on your ISP in week 1 in every class. From now on, you're going to become very familiar with ISPs, and we'll be able to produce those pretty quickly. So those are the assignments you're going to include in your ISP. These assignments, I know there's been several questions about how many hours can these be worth, and in general, they are usually worth 10 hours. And that's just a very, again, fluid number. Depends on you, depends on how much time you use to research the assignment and how much time you spend, translating that knowledge into your clinical practice. So on average, most of those assignments are about 10 hours, and then your case studies that you'll have in week 7, case reports in week 7 are usually around 20, because they're a more lengthy, lengthy paper. So those acquire usually a little bit more practice immersion hours. Discussion questions do not qualify for practice immersion hours. Just your weekly assignments that have that statement. And then typically what happens, so your first ISP that you put in week 1 is really a draft, because things may change, right? Things may change in that 8 weeks. So that's a draft of kind of your goals, really, your goals of what those look like. And I believe I have an example. So sorry, I kind of detoured here, but let's go into this. So individual success plan, there is a sample. This is in DC Network as well. And so this is what this looks like. Here's the course. Target practice hours, you're getting that total from counting up your assignments. You want to make sure all this piece is filled out. Potential challenges, I haven't been seeing these completed. So I don't know if these are getting missed, but you do actually want to, it says, consider the challenges you expect to encounter as you continue the practice hour and competency requirements for this course, how much you overcome these challenges. And so typically students can place potential challenges in whatever course and then talk about your personal challenges for completing these assignments. And then this is what this looks like. So it's week by week. List current course objectives. Those are placed in the course syllabus. And then number of clock hours. the due date, and then the date assignment complete. Here's the ISP, which does not acquire any clock hours. And then here are the domains and competencies, which you will also find located in your Typhon. So Typhon will match, your ISP should match your Typhon case logs, okay? So these are the same domains and competencies that are in Typhon. So week 2, no hours, there's no assignments, and moving on. So week 3, here's a paper that was in DNP-840, 10 hours, there's the due date, and on and on. So that's what that looks like. And then you'll want to be familiar with this one actually had milestones. So you'll want to be familiar with that as well. And that's all located in the DC network, your milestones document. So this is the initial one. And then when in week 8, you'll want to place a final ISP in Typhon under external documents. And your final one will have these, completed. So whenever you completed, or when you had an assignment, whenever you completed that assignment, the date will go there. So this is located in DC Network under DNP-805 folder. I will show you DC Network in this presentation as well. But that's what this should look like. And then your final ISP, again, some of those hours may change based on what you actually did during the course. So back to practice immersion hours very quickly. Practice immersion hours, let me give you an example of what this looks like. So in your genetics class, say I wrote a paper on Alzheimer's disease, the genetics of Alzheimer's disease, and I'm still a practicing clinician. I'm a nurse practitioner. I see patients every Friday, geriatric patients in their homes. And so say I write a paper on genetics, and when I see patients that week, I'm going to translate that knowledge that I have from that paper into my patient population. So if I see my Alzheimer's patients, are they candidates for genetics? What does that look like with those patients, with that patient population? So that's kind of the concept of it. And so most of the time, like I said, you can claim 10 hours for that, give or take, depending on what that looks like as far as the research you spent on that paper, for that paper, and incorporating that into patient hours. But remember that in Typhon, as we're going to look at, we are not documenting individual patients. Let me say that again. We are not documenting individual patients in Typhon. We are documenting those weekly assignments and how we translated that information into practice immersion hours. Okay? So on average, for Typhon, every 8-week course, you'll usually have between 5 and 8 submissions, case logs, documenting those weekly assignments. Okay? So let's look into, I have my screen share here onto Typhon. You do not use time logs at all. So if any of you did, I'm sure there's some of you that did your master's here, particularly if you were an APRN, you probably have some experience with Typhon and you're used to documenting those individual patients. Now we are using Typhon in a completely different way for the DNP program. It's actually much simpler than you use in your graduate program. But it does take a shift of thinking to be able to document correctly in this program. So again, let me repeat, we are not using time logs in this program. You will document all of your practice immersion hours under case log. And I have a different view than you. So you're going into case log, and then I'm going to show you what yours looks like. And this again is in the DC network as well. So you're going to go in and you're going to click on your semester. And to those of you that brought it to my attention that the dates were wrong for your DNP-805 for this semester, I'm looking into that. That will be changed soon if it hasn't been already. So you should be looking for that. You should have the correct semester date for DNP-805. You will have your preceptor name here. It's under preceptor, although we call them mentors. Your clinical site should be there once it's approved. Age and gender, these are just placeholders. So because we're not documenting on individual patients. So you are always going to have age of 1 year, gender male for every single case log, because we are not capturing patient demographics, individual patients. So clinical information, you will put all of your time for practice immersion hours under time with patient. Let me repeat that. You will put all of your practice immersion hours under time with patient only. Consult with preceptor, you should not have any hours in there. Any time consulting with your preceptor will not be counted towards your final total practice immersion hours. So time with patient, this one has 600 minutes. Please note this is in minutes. They're not in hours. So this one's saying 10 hours translates to 600 minutes. So that's what that looks like. And then under procedure skills, this is where all of those domains and competencies lie. That's what matches your ISP in that same section. So that's what that looks like. And you are the one choosing those depending on what the project, what the assignment entails. So take a look at those. I know this first class, this seems very tedious. By the end of your next couple courses, you will have these memorized. You'll be able to click on these within a couple seconds. So stick with it, and this whole Typhon process gets a lot easier once you become a little bit more familiar with it. So this next part, it says what type of evidence was used. This is up to you. Most people put scholarly references, something to that extent, evidence-based references, something to that extent. Practice problem identified, and then practice problem researched, resolved. Most of these you will put yes to, because most of our assignments, that's what you're looking at, are practice issues. In clinical notes, you are required to put clinical notes. What I would highly suggest what this would look like is about 5 to 6 sentences that discuss your topic for your paper that you just wrote. So please do not put paper on genetics. I want you to actually specifically write in the topic that you researched and you wrote on. So a couple sentences. Many students use your thesis from your paper. A couple sentences of your thesis, and then your conclusion, something like that. It doesn't have to be a difficult process. Just something that when I go in, when your faculty goes in to approve these, they know exactly what you're talking about. Okay. So this is what a case log looks like. I hope I've demystified it a little bit. It gets easier as you move along. Remember that we're not using a lot of the areas of Typhon. You're really just using those case logs to document your practice immersion hours. Now, along those lines, you'll also see external resources. What is it? I'm blanking right now. It's external links, external documents. There we go, external documents. And on the external documents, that's where you will click on that and then enter your ISP, your week 7 case reports, reflective journals, those type of things. That's where those external documents is where those go. And while I'm on that, let me briefly show you a reflective journal. I pulled up a template that we have for your weekly reflective journal. I suggest that you do this weekly so that at the end you don't have this long assignment due. And this is a template. This is optional, but this just kind of helps. And you don't have to, sit here and answer every single question in this. Maybe just summarize some of these questions. But again, this is available in the DC network. So you may want to take a look at that. That may help just kind of organize the weekly reflective journal that we'll be doing every class in week 8. So you'll become very familiar with that as well. And this is one of the documents that goes into the external documents link in Typhon. Okay. Let me see what else I wanted to cover. DC Network. Let me open DC Network. I want to make sure that I touch on that. All right, so when you go into DC Network, and that's at dc.gcu.edu, DC Network is Doctoral Community Network. That's what that stands for. And the DC Network has all of the doctoral programs. So you can see here, EDD community, PhD community, DBA community, and then DNP community. This is another area that you will find an immense amount of resources. So I highly suggest that you take a peek at this. So you will click on DNP community, and here is where I posted our meeting for today. I have tips and announcements, Student Town webinars. We have that every 4th Tuesday of the month. That is for all graduate and doctoral students. And then I also have a link to the graduate guidelines manual here. So I often post probably about weekly, if not more. I try to post information in this DNP tips and announcements. You also have an opportunity here to have a question and answer. And you can see several questions here. And as long as it's a new thread, there's threads from years ago in here, and sometimes students will attach a question to that thread. I will not get those, so I highly suggest making a new thread if it's an original question. These go directly to me. So it'll just send me a pop-up on my email. I'll know that somebody has a question in here and I can answer it quickly. But what's nice about this is that you can also, your peers can also answer it. So your peers will see your question, and you know, what's really nice about this program is there's people that have done this ahead of you and may have some, you know, really great pearls of wisdom. So something that they looked into and, you know, they had questions on. So here's a perfect example. So definitely utilize this. It's great to network with other peers as well. So that's one area of this. And then the last piece of this down here that I would suggest looking at, so right in the middle here you have DNP program materials. If you click on DNP program documents, what I have created here are folders for each course that you're in. So here's DNP-805, and here's several of the things that we just discussed today. So individual success plan, reflective journal instructions, description, Typhon documents. Here's the PowerPoint that I went over today. Field and almost everything that we went over today. Here's the milestones that you'll need for your ISP, end of course evaluations. Here's the practicum mentor letter, how to use Zoom, all of these things. So each one of the courses has their own folder. And again, that's in their DNP program materials, DNP program documents, and then all the rest of the folders. What's also in here, if you were unable to access this or have not seen this until now, you can go back into DNP 801, you have access. And in there, you also have your learner orientation. And in your learner orientation has all kinds of great things: academic writing guidelines, commencement information, learner expectation, tutorials, all of these different things to help you get on the right track. So if you haven't seen that, you may want to go back and check out DNP 801 as well. And then if you're like me, type A, and want to know what's ahead, you can look into that DNP 810 and see, you know, kind of what's going on in the next couple courses as well. So you have a lot of resources here. It's just a matter of being familiar with them and knowing how to utilize them. I don't think I have any other screen shares here. So what I'm going to do at this time, I'm going to let you guys unmute yourself if you have a question. And I'm going to stop the recording. So those of you listening to the recording, thank you so much for your time. Please feel free to contact me at any point. My email is jennifer.billingsley, BILLINGSLEY, @gcu.edu. Please review your resources and let me know if you have questions.